Hey guys, welcome to Masquerade of Motherhood, or as I like to call it, the Mom Show. I'm your host, Courtney Doyle, and this is a place where I am giving you permission to not have it all together.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Unmasking Me series. Today we're talking about a mother-in-law and two daughters-in-law. Here's a question for you. If I said, tell me about your mother-in-law, would you say, she is all in my business. She thinks her son does no wrong. She tells me how to parent her grandchildren. I can't really talk to her about anything. Our relationship is just kind of sour. Or would it be more like, my mother-in-law loves me like a daughter. She listens when I need to vent about her son. She helps me with the kids. She knows her boundaries, and I just adore her. What I found is there's typically two very strong feelings, one way or the other, for this special set of mothers. Now, I'm not in this sacred position yet with my children, but I can certainly relate as I have a mother-in-law and I have a mother who is a mother-in-law. And they have two very distinct personalities in that role, kind of depending on their children as well. My mother could be tough, and she is fiercely protective of her babies. She loves us deeply, and she doesn't hold her thoughts for 1 second. She's more passionate, though, about her relationship with my brother, and she's not as forgiving of his wife. Now, as far as the girls are concerned, she loves us girls. We have always been her best friends, and I do find that she's more lenient on the sons-in-law. Maybe because her daughters still lean on her for guidance, talk to her about everything. We ask her those mothering questions, where a son doesn't really need that relationship as strongly as a daughter does. Being an only child, I think my mother needed that from her kids, and, the girls were happy to oblige. My mother-in-law, on the other hand, is quiet. She's a great listener. She's slow to react, compassionate, and very much a peacekeeper for the family. She only has sons, so I believe she's never had a daughter, so she knows no other relationship than one of a daughter-in-law. I also think she's cautious of her boundaries because she knows her daughter-in-laws are the direct link to her relationship with the boys, because they are going to forget to call, say happy birthday, and certainly aren't the ones making plans for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Naomi was a mother-in-law suffering with great heartache. She was filled with strength and God's promises and advice for her daughters-in-law. Her relationship with her daughter-in-law, Ruth, is explained in the sweetest chapters in Scripture. The book of Ruth. It's 4 small chapters, yet they are filled with heartaches, desperation, commitment, loyalty, love. The story closes with a happy ending for all. It's like a modern-day soap opera. Let's jump in. Naomi was married to a man by the name of Elimelech. They had 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. A famine had struck their land in Bethlehem in Judah, and as a family, they decided to set out and to live in a land called Moab. Now, Moab was not a land of the God of Israel, but it was a land of pagan gods that people worshipped. Elimelech and Naomi set off on this journey in hopes to find better conditions for their family. Yet in doing this, they turned away from their land, their family, and the God whom they believed in. Have you ever convinced yourself that running or leaving one place is the best thing you can do for your family, only to realize where you end up is not any better or potentially worse? You know the old saying, the grass isn't greener on the other side. Here's what happens to Naomi's family. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to Moab and lived there. Now, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. After they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Chilion also died, and Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. So while in Moab, Naomi's husband dies. Her sons had married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. They remained in Moab about 10 years. Then both sons died. Naomi was left without her husband and without her sons. Only her daughter-in-laws were left. The place that they ran to for refuge had become a graveyard, and Naomi was crushed. We can never really prepare our hearts for the loss of a loved one, the loss of a spouse. I watched as my father-in-law suffered and died from cancer at a very young age, leaving my precious mother-in-law a widow at barely 50 years old. The agony that we all felt with his untimely passing was devastating, and watching my young, beautiful mother-in-law attempt to rebuild her life alone was indeed heartbreaking. Fast forward 23 years, and one of my brother-in-laws passed away. A husband and a son. My mother-in-law can identify with the pain of loss that Naomi has experienced. Naomi was torn, lost, sad, desperate, lonely, and just flat out broken. She had to find refuge from Moab, and her best solution was to go back to Bethlehem, where her family was and where her God was. As Naomi sets off with Orpah and Ruth, she realizes she can't offer these girls anything. She isn't able to offer them any more sons to be married to. She's old in age. She doesn't have the ability to provide for them, so she sets them free. In fact, she begs them to return to their families. The only thing these 3 women have in common at this point is their suffering and loss. Naomi is letting them go and loving them the best way she knows how. Orpah takes the offer and returns to her family, but Ruth refuses. Here's what it says. At this they wept aloud again. Then Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, but Ruth clung to her. Ruth replied, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." When Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. You see, Ruth sees something in Naomi. She trusts her, she has witnessed her strength, and she trusts her God and realizes in this moment that following her mother-in-law is better than returning to the land of Moab. Naomi's name means pleasant. A pleasant mother-in-law, a mother-in-law who is agreeable, lovely, nice, satisfying, enjoyable. What amazing qualities for any mother or mother-in-law to have. But upon their return to Bethlehem, Naomi and Ruth are welcomed with cheers and open arms, yet Naomi is not pleasant anymore, but rather she is hurt and bitter, and she instructs the people to call her Mara, which means bitter. A few synonyms of bitter are unpleasant, sour, nasty, cheated, cynical, and resentful. Just the opposite of who Naomi truly is. You see, Naomi has a hole in her heart that can't be filled. Can you see how life can change who we are, who God created us to be, if we don't keep our eyes focused on Him? Would life and the tragedies Naomi had lived through been different if she and Elimelech had not decided to take the journey to look for quote-unquote greener grass? I don't know. What I do know is that as parents, we have to always weigh our options and the decisions we make as our journeys affect our families, and we need to be sure we're making those decisions in prayer and supplication to God's wishes and desires for our lives and not just our own selfish wants. Let me ask you this. Is pleasant or any of the other synonyms I mentioned, are they adjectives people would use to describe you? Or Are you bitter, sulky, unpleasant, and cynical? Do you feel cheated or resentful over a circumstance in your life or a circumstance with one of your kids? My mother-in-law could have fallen into bitterness and anger, and honestly, I don't know that I would have blamed her. I can't imagine what it must have been like for her. No one can truly understand the depth of that loss unless you too have walked in those shoes. Naomi left with her husband and children looking for greener grass, and nothing positive came from it. Now she has to return home, head bowed, shame, sadness, bitterness, and pain as she enters her former town. So often we think we're making the best decision, only to find out we should have stayed the course, and it can be humiliating and humbling to admit we're wrong. Naomi wasn't being judged by God for those decisions, though. She was judging herself. Don't get caught in that trap of judging yourself too harshly. We don't know how we're going to handle a situation until we're in it or how something affects us. Ask God for a clear mind to see yourself as He sees you and to walk you through any difficulty. But what about Ruth, you might ask? How does this story play out? Does Naomi ever return to being pleasant, God-centered, providing strength and mentoring Ruth? Well, that's a great question. And it's one that I'm going to answer in 2 weeks when we pick up this story with Ruth. And we see how God's hand is at work in these two ladies' lives in a miraculous and big way. Until next time.
If you want to print, screenshot, or share this week's verse, head to the show notes where you're going to find a link to my website and a graphic for you to use. Thanks so much for listening to Masquerade of Motherhood with Courtney Doyle. We want to be sure this blesses you and other mothers. And in order to do this, first, you must subscribe. This way you won't ever miss an episode. Also, if you'll rate and review this podcast on iTunes or wherever you're listening, this will increase our reach to other mothers who need a little encouragement, a community, and a whole lot of Jesus. We're so glad you're here.